everyone. Welcome to our Summer Spirit Worship Service for the Sunday, July the 5th. My name is Richard Chung. Now, you are probably wondering what I'm doing here like this, and welcoming you and greeting you to worship service like this in place like this. Well, this is Horseshoe Bay Ferry Terminal. I'm waiting for to board a ferry to going into Vancouver Island. Now, I will be spending next few days in camping. I booked in one of the provincial parks in Vancouver Island for a few days. Now, as you can see, there are a whole lot of people, a lot of cars here, and it's just, I think it's kind of understandable because the COVID thing really locked people up for last several months, and people are itching to come out and to enjoy the nature. And so I'm very excited about going to camp. So I thought, what a better way to actually start our Summer Spirit Worship service in the nature, in God's original sanctuary, in the beauty and wonder of God's creation as our background. So come along with me to my camping trip. Come along to worship together as we enter into God's sanctuary.
This campsite's like pretty bad.
Yeah, it's like packed in. Okay. Oops. Look at that. Beautiful, eh? Oh, it's been like raining since 10 o'clock last night until close to 8 o'clock this morning for about 10 hours. The forecast is telling us that it'll be raining and it'll get clear around 8 to 9 o'clock, but it doesn't seem like it's going to get, sunny anytime. It doesn't seem like it's going to get sunny anytime soon. But we'll still have a great time today, right? That's what camping is all about. So this is Miracle Beach, and we have set our camp at Miracle Beach Provincial Park Campground. This is my third time in camping in this beautiful place. As you can see, why we call this Miracle Beach. The beauty and wonder of God's beauty is just so present in this place. Now, as you can see, it's around 12 o'clock noon. Waters is receding at this point. Around 2 o'clock this afternoon, water will recede all the way to about 1 kilometer all the way to the deep, where the deep water begins. I'll be mostly doing some walking today and also doing some beachcombing along the way as I walk, but mostly I'll be taking in the beauty and wonder of God's creation, God's sanctuary. Try to take all in, but as you know, it's impossible for any person, any soul to take all of God's beauty at once. You need to take your time. You need to take in little by little of God's wonder and God's beauty. So come along. You wrote the story of my life. You go before, you fall behind. Yeah. Before a breath beyond my death, you are with me all the way. Never lasting. I can run, I can hide. Even darkness is a light, from the lowest place to the highest. too wonderful for me. There's only one thing left to sing. You are worthy, Search me, God, and know my heart. Try me, know my anxious thoughts. Yeah, find the weakness in my heart. Lead me in the way everlasting. I can't run, I can't hide, even the places alive. From the lowest place to the highest place, you are worthy. Amazing love, how can it be? So this beautiful scene reminds me of, I think it's about 30 years ago when I finished my seminary and about to enter into church ministry, the most important transition in my life so far at the time, almost 30 years ago. And I remember that I was also walking on the lakeshore, Lake Ontario, and I was wondering about trying to comprehend the wonder and privilege and the fear of uncertainty of what lies beyond the ministry, what God had in plan for me in my ministry, in my life. And I was excited in one hand, but also was quite anxious over beyond what lies beyond. I was taking biggest hurdle. Because I was taking biggest transition in my life up to that point. Excited, but at the same time quite nervous. So it's been over 30 years since I walked on the shore of Lake Ontario. As I was going through that transition, biggest transition of my life. And over the last 30 years, I've gone through many changes, many transitions in my life, in my ministry. There was some times that were big and small, and sometimes some of them were very enjoyable transitions and changes. And as you know, some of them were very painful, sad, very challenging time. But all throughout the transitions and changes, one thing was constant, that deep in my heart, even when I went through most painful and difficult, challenging transition in my life, I've never lost hope, because deep in my heart, I always knew that God was there with me. That wherever I went and whatever I did, I knew deep in my heart that God was there. And I always remember the promise, the words of God in the scripture. And for me, it still rings loudly. It's that, Richard, you are my beloved. You are not alone. I am with you. So that words and that promise have been the anchor and hope wherever I went, whatever I did, even in times of where I felt that I was walking through the valley of death and pain. I always knew that I was never alone, that I was always with God, that God was walking with me all the way. Now that is miracle of all miracles, that I am not alone, that you are not alone, that we are not alone, that we are God's children. And you formed me in my mother's womb. You know my frame, my flesh and bone. I describe its way too high. You see me through and come in love. What a wonderful place. So in the last 3 months at Knox, we've been doing worship series, sermon series based on the book of Exodus. We've been doing that. I titled that The Ultimate Survival Guide, Ultimate Wilderness Survival Guide, How to Thrive in a Pandemic Wilderness Journey and Beyond. Now, as you know, as we were entering into COVID-19 and lockdown in the middle of March, and I wanted to help people try to hold us together, ground us together, just kind of reframing what we are going through, the transition that we were going through, kind of reframe in as we reflect in the biblical story. And I thought, what better way to read the book of Exodus, the people of Israelites, as they were going through Exodus journey. Why not just study, and why not reflect on that and see that we are part of that story, that God's story and people of God's story is part of our story. So we've done about part 9 or part 10. I forgot how many parts we've done. And based on book of Exodus, we've gone through chapter 1 through chapter 30 something. And we went through the story of how God has freed Israelites through the leadership of Moses, how they have crossed the Red Sea, and how God has led them through the pillar of fire and pillar of cloud, and then led them through the wilderness journey for 40 years, and how God has given the new law, given 10 commandments, and how God has refined and reformed and retrained. It's some sort of kind of boot camp for God's people to refine and kind of formulate them. How God has kind of refined and reformed people to be ready to receive God's promise that God has promised to them since the time of Abraham, to that promised land. Now today I want to touch a little bit about book of Joshua, chapter 1 to chapter 3. Now the Israelites is after 40 years now. Now, after 40 years of Exodus journey, Israelites finding themselves facing the biggest hurdle in their transition in their life. They're looking beyond the Jordan River to the promised land that God had promised to them many hundreds years ago. And they were standing over there looking through the Jordan River beyond what lies ahead, beyond the waters of Jordan River, as we're taking transition into taking claim the land that God has promised long time ago. And this is first thing that God has spoken in the Bible, book of Joshua. God has said, first thing that what God has said, the first thing that God speaks to Joshua was that, Joshua, be strong and be courageous. Be strong and be courageous. I am with you every step you take. God is encouraging Joshua, but also God is encouraging the Israelites as they were facing the most difficult transition in their wilderness journey. And as they were facing as well, looking beyond the waters of Jordan River as they were crossing, about to cross over the waters. And then later on in Joshua chapter 3, God has continued to encourage, and God has shown us what really means that God will be walking with them. God will take steps, each step of the way with Joshua and with Israelites. God says, Joshua, tell the priest to carry the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And let them carry over there on the edge of Jordan River, and let them cross over and stand in beyond. Let them take their feet onto the Jordan water, and the water will separate, will cut off for the people of Israel to cross over. So Joshua spoke and ordered a priest to carry the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And as they were setting their feet onto the water of Jordan, the water of Jordan just separated, cut off into, and they walked all the way in the middle of the Jordan River in the dry land. They stood over there while all the Israelites crossed over from the wilderness to the promised land. And that's how God demonstrated God's presence, that God is with them all the way, to Joshua and to the people of Israel.
It's a song of praise to the Maker. The thrush sings high in the tree. It's a song of praise to the Maker. The gray whale sings in the sea, and by the Spirit, you and I can join our voice to the holy cry, and sing, sing, sing to the Maker tune. It's a call of life to the giver, when waves and waterfalls roar. It's a call of life to the giver, when high tides break on the shore. And by the Spirit, you and I can join our voice to the holy cry, and sing, sing, sing to the Maker tune.
Now, if we are to just read today's book of Joshua text today, we'd probably think that, well, that was quite easy. You know, what God had done, and God performed the miracle, and Joshua and priest, they just went into the water, and miracle happened, the water separated, and all people had to do was just cross over the dry land and just claim the promised land. We think that it would be quite easy, kind of cakewalk. But as you know, it's not a cakewalk. As you know, through your life experience, all transitions are not easy. And even for Israelites, this transition was the biggest transition ever that they were taking. I mean, they spent 40 years in the wilderness. They were tough, but nothing compared to what they're about to face to claim the promised land. Because they were crossing over the Jordan River without the person, the leader who was there for 40 years, Moses. Moses was not there with them. Moses was dead. As a matter of fact, they just had 30 days of grief and mourning over Moses' death. Who was Moses? Oh, Moses was God's representation. Moses was more like a God figure than anybody else for 40 years. Moses who performed the miracle. Moses who took the God's covenant and who brought down 10 commandments. Moses who just single-handedly took whole Israelites from the beginning to the Jordan River was no more. Moses was not there anymore. And who else was there in place of Moses? It was Joshua. Who was Joshua? Well, as far as we know, we don't know much about Joshua so far because he was kind of untested, kind of unproven. He had never taken part in any leadership. He had never taken any leadership in man's breakfast. He had never been proven as a leader in one way or the other. And Joshua and all of the other Israelites were second generation. So they were looking at Joshua for leadership, and they had God's words with them, but in their deep heart, in their core, they were uncertain, they were doubting, they were fearful as they faced and as they were about to embark on one of the most difficult transitions of their life. So how do you prepare to cross over Jordan River? How do you prepare to cross over the waters and claim the land God has promised for you? How do you become a people of crossover? Now, for the last 3 months, we are in the most difficult and most challenging and most strange transitions that we've ever faced. I think in my own life, I've never faced anything like this with the COVID-19 and all the lockdowns and everything is happening in the pandemic crisis that we've all experienced for the last 3 months at least. And we don't know what's going to happen, even with all the opening and people coming back and the less infections in Canada, but there are a whole bunch of infections happening. It's not getting any better. So how do we manage and navigate this pandemic wilderness journey and beyond? It's been quite challenging for many of us, all of us, for the last few months. And I am not sure that things will get better as we transition ourselves into a new normal. And I have no idea what that new normal might look like. I mean, we can guess, and there are a lot of experts and professionals who are out there what the trends will be later, and not only for individually, but also church-wise as well. One expert, I think I heard out of many articles, said that there will be many churches will close down, and mostly mainline denominations will see next few months, within next year, about 1/3 mainline churches will close down. And now that's a very, very grim picture. So I don't know, and I don't want to predict. I'm not a person to predict the future, but I know that even in this challenging and in this strange, in this new normal that we all go through, I know one thing that I think all God's people throughout history, in the Bible, in the last 2,000 years of God's people, known deep in their heart, in their core, is that we're not alone. Is that God has been with us, and God is with us, and God will be with us through this difficult transition that we are taking together. As we cross over the waters of pandemic wilderness, God will go before us, and God will be taking steps, every step that we take, and God will be behind us, pushing us along the way. So we don't lose hope.
Amazing love, how can it be? Far too wonderful for me. There's only one thing left to sing. You are worthy.
Beyond the waters of Jordan River, there is a promised land that God has promised for each one of us to claim. It's not going to be easy, but one thing that I know, and one thing that I know is that God is with us all the way. Indeed, I am not alone. You are not alone. We are not alone. Indeed, there's nothing will separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ. Nothing on this earth, nothing on this heaven, not even death will separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ. And that is promise for each one of us. And that's my anchor, that's my ground, that's what I hold on to. Indeed, I am not alone, never alone. You are not alone. We are not alone. And thanks be to God.
It's a hymn of love to the lover. The bumblebees come along. It's a hymn of love to the lover. The summer Spirit, you and I can join our voice to the holy cry and sing, sing, sing to the Maker tune. It's the chorus of all creation. It's sung by all living things. It's the chorus of all creation, a song the universe sings, and by the Spirit, you and I can join our voice to the holy cry and sing, sing, sing to the Maker tune.
We are not alone. We live in God's Word. We believe in God, who has created and is created, who has come in Jesus, the Word made flesh, to reconcile and make new, who works in us and others by the Spirit. We trust in God. We are called to be the church, to celebrate God's presence, to live with respect in creation, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, to proclaim Jesus crucified and risen, our judge and our hope. In life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God.